A much, much better episode of Monday Night Raw. Far more engaging, far more interesting. Stuff actually happened. But next week, good luck. Alright, so this was Monday Night Raw from January the 13th, 2024. Not much in the way of news and notes, to be quite honest. There's still some debates going on about the Netflix number for Monday Night Raw. I have no idea what it is. All I know is that on network television, on Fox, they got a 3.9. That's 3.9 million human beings watch that show. If it's within the same bracket as that, it's probably not that good. That just means that they got their 2019 audience back. That's all. Their peak 2019 audience back. If it was like 10 million or something like that worldwide, I would be impressed. But what they think they say, like 4 or something like that, I'm not, especially globally, not that impressed. Let's get into the show though, and then I'm going to talk about probably the pay-per-view schedule that comes out. We'll talk about that at the end, I guess. Kind of bookend the show with news and notes. So CM Punk enters the Royal Rumble, Seth Rollins enters the Royal Rumble, and Drew McIntyre entered the Royal Rumble. All in the same segment. This took way too long as they threw barbs at each other. Punk wants to win the Rumble. He said there's no neon sign out there with WrestleMania on it, but he sees it, which of course reminded me that there is no WrestleMania sign for them to point to. Which usually there's a WrestleMania sign shortly before Royal Rumble. They decided to have no WrestleMania sign because everything must change. So CM Punk has to mention that he has that vision. Rollins just wants to stop Punk from winning it. And McIntyre, he wants to win the Rumble to prevent Roman from winning it. So it's not that these guys really want to be world champion. It's more like they're haters. They're professional haters. I'm going to be there to cut your nuts off, whether I lose or not. So that doesn't make sense. Anyway, McIntyre and Rollins get into it. They're going to have a match next week. McIntyre claimed that he had no interest in CM Punk, but Seth Rollins is all talk. He said he was going to help get rid of Roman. When everybody came out there to stop him from getting the Ulafala, Seth Rollins did nothing. And then he turned around and lost to CM Punk. So he's pretty pissy at Seth Rollins. So they call it a WrestleMania rematch next week between Rollins and McIntyre, which is fine, except who's the babyface in this situation? See, all these areas of gray, who's the babyface here? Rollins just came out there and admitted that he ain't shit but a hater, and the only reason he wants to be in the Royal Rumble is to stop CM Punk from winning it. And of course, Drew McIntyre is a generational hater. Who is the fan supposed to cheer for in that match? I don't know. Good question, right? Anyway, they set that up. So that's I guess the main event next week. I don't have anything against it other than who am I supposed to root for? And what? It seemed like a match for no reason, if we're being honest. It just feels forced, and it feels like some disqualification bait, if you ask me. I do like that Seth has been more serious. I will give him that credit. He's been more serious. The audience seems to be more interested in him too. And Drew McIntyre has been obviously meeting all expectations. And Punk has too, to be quite honest. Except for when he was interrupted by Seth Rollins. He starts mumbling into the microphone. Why couldn't it be Rhea Ripley to interrupt me? Which I know gonna get a lot of people like, oh, CM Punk, he's obsessed with the young girls. He always want to be around the young girls. Rhea Ripley's a little old for him. She's 30. I shouldn't say stuff like that. Let's move on. Penta defeated Chad Gable. Let's talk about Penta's entrance. It was very La Parka. He looks like La Parka. But, it was great. I didn't like the music. The music always sucks. But they took certain elements of his AEW presentation, like the fire, the Cero Miedo call out, but he was super over here. I mean, my God, they loved him. They're selling the mask already. They spoiled his debut by WWE Shop posting the merchandise like 3 or 4 hours before the show actually aired. Like in the middle of the day, like a bunch of merchandise came out. They're selling his masks for $75. They're selling Penta masks for $75. The Mexicans I saw online were acting up. Like they could not believe that Americans are willing to pay $75 for a Penta's mask. They don't get it. They don't understand, man. Masks are not what they are down there up here. You know, it's a cultural difference. You can't buy every wrestler's mask. And they might be able to buy some kind of bootleg version, but they didn't really sell masks of a lot of people. I don't think you can buy a Dragon Lee mask. Can you? I didn't look. But in any event, let's get into this match. So Penta has not had a really good singles match since like 2018. I think the match he had with Kenny Omega at All In was probably the last great singles match that Penta has had. And he's kind of been chilling ever since. Especially since he signed to AEW, they put him in a tag team. Penta been going half-mast. But in this match, it was almost like he had jumped out of the lake of rejuvenation. He was selling, and selling a lot, and selling well. And he botched a couple of moves to show that he was a little older than he probably thought, but his mind was in the right place. He nailed his dive, even though Chad Gable wasn't in the right position to catch him. The crowd was behind him 100%. He just had a great match. It was a little too 50-50 for a guy's debut match. This is probably a match that he probably should have had 3 or 4 matches in. But they went out there, they showed what he could do. He sold. He won convincingly. And then he cut a promo, half in English, half in Spanish. Didn't really have much to say, except for, thanking everybody for being there with his journey to WWE. His family was in the front row, faces wet, crying, happy, taking pictures, So it was a great time. To me, this was the best Penta match in a long time. Chad Gable worked wonders here. Penta looked strong. He looked competent. He looked better here than he's looked most of his time in AEW. Because most of his time in AEW, he was basically just doing Zeo Miedo and super kicks. And that was pretty much it. He wasn't really used that much as a singles act. But here, they allowed his charisma to show. He was allowed to get the fans behind him. He worked as a pure babyface. There were some whispers about maybe him turning heel, but I don't think you can wait on that. There were some people who were really red-assed about the idea of Penta being the best luchador outside of Rey Mysterio. Because they're like, haven't you heard of El Hijo del Dr. Wagner Jr.? Haven't you heard of Mystico, Hechechero, and Blue Panther? Haven't you heard of all of these people? It's like, no, it's WWE. They're trying to hype their guy, man. Chill. Just relax. It's not that. WWE is not trying to put out a history book. All right? This is a promotion. They're promoting their talent. They're saying this is the best luchador outside of Rey Mysterio so that everybody can pay attention to this guy. He's nowhere near the same level of popularity as Mystico. All right? I know that. Everybody should know that. He's probably not even the same stratosphere as like Psycho Clown, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's okay. It'll be fine. I did hear Michael Cole, however, say Penta was a TNA World Champion, which I'm sure a lot of people forgot. I'm sure a lot of people forgot that. He was only champion for like a day or two. It was like I think Rhino was champion about as long as he was, probably like 3 days or something like that. I think he won it at the pay-per-view and then lost it at the next set of tapings, which might have been the day after or 2-3 days later or something like that. He wasn't world champion in TNA very long, but he was world champion in TNA. They did mention he was world champion in Lucha Underground, which I 100% know that you're just mentioning just to hype up Penta, because they've never mentioned Lucha Underground when it comes to anybody else. So they're doing their best to try to get everybody familiar with them, running down his accolades and everything. So that ended up being pretty good. Okay, next, Sheamus defeated Ludwig Kaiser. Afterwards, Sheamus got into a shoving match with Braun Breaker, who also was not featured on this show. He was just sitting in the crowd like a jabroni. Then they separated, and it was announced on Saturday night's main event, Sheamus versus Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker is not going to wrestle on Netflix, apparently. Now he's going to be on Saturday night's main event. Now look, Saturday night's main event is a huge platform. It's network television. I would like for everybody to know who this guy is, though. Like, this Netflix audience, if these are new fans, they haven't seen Braun Breaker yet. And there's no good reason why they haven't. He should at least be talking. Him just sitting in the crowd, he doesn't look like everybody else, but he's oddly tanned. So then there's that. And Sheamus's eternal pursuit of the Intercontinental title, I'm always a big fan of that. I wasn't a big fan of this match, though, because I feel like I've seen these guys wrestle 100 times, and I was not interested in having another Sheamus Ludwig Kaiser match in my diet. But I'm okay with Sheamus and Braun Breaker. I really just want Braun Breaker to break through, and I want Triple H to get out of his way, because the guy has all the tools in the world to be as over as some of these other guys on the roster. But Triple H insists on standing in his way. He's playing defense. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you playing defense on the young god? Let him through. Let him do his thing. Okay. Another note, I just forgot until now. His cousin has gotten an NIL deal. Scott Steiner has a son that plays football, and he did an interview recently talking about burying the hatchet with various people in WWE, and that his son got offered an NIL contract, and he is looking to join WWE. So you might have the Steiner cousins in WWE, which could be phenomenal. Hopefully Scott's son has inherited some of that Steiner DNA, because that could be some really fun stuff with the two of them on the same show, or at least in the same company. That could be great. But yeah, Braun Breaker versus Sheamus, Saturday night's main event. Okay, fine, but you got to feature Braun Breaker on TV at some point. You have to build up angles, let him talk, all these sorts of things, right? All right. So I forgot to mention Sami Zayn and Seth Rollins. They had a run-in where Seth Rollins was talking about Sami Zayn helping Roman Reigns and how often he's going to keep helping Roman Reigns. And, are you going to help him win the Royal Rumble? You going to help him win his world title back? Just basically being a jerk. This led Sami Zayn to go towards Adam Pearce's office. And when he runs into Karrion Kross and The Miz, Karrion Kross is, of course, very, very upset because the Wyatt Six have been sent to SmackDown. All 6 of them have been shuffled off to SmackDown. And he kind of want to blame The Miz for this, but The Miz don't say he ain't got nothing to do with this. Then we had a verbal battle of the top knot as Sami Zayn with his top knot grumbled against Karrion Kross with his top knot. And I was just shaking my head. Both of these guys look like they work in cubicles, except Sami Zayn looks like he sleeps in his. And then it ended up with Sami Zayn and The Miz being face to face, and The Miz telling Sami Zayn he's been world champion twice, which is 2 more times than Sami Zayn will ever be, which leads to a match which of course The Miz loses because of course he's The Miz, right? So they kind of squeezed that match into the show. But Kross wanted to continue his feud with the Wyatt Six, only to find out they've been moved, is not interesting. That's a very odd way to end that feud. And it doesn't make the Wyatts look strong. It make them look like they got ran away. Like they lost one match and then got moved for the entire brand. Like that's nuts. I thought, however, that it was looking like Cross was going to climb up the card. Like, okay, now he's going to start a feud with Sami Zayn, which is a higher level feud than what Cross has been doing. He hasn't had a consistent higher level opponent yet. And I was thinking to myself, a feud with a guy like Sami Zayn could prepare him for a match with Gunther. But it seems like, nope, they're not going there yet. But Cross, he's not a young guy. He's like in his late 30s. It's time for him to start moving up on the roster. If you're going to push him, is what I mean, then it's time for him to start trying to work into these top spots to get in there with upper mid-card heels like a Damian Priest, like a Sami Zayn. I should say baby faces, rather. But they're, again, playing defense. They're not so sure how to get him in there. Well, it's like, just put him in there. Shit. He should be in there with Sheamus and guys like that, Anyway, there's some Judgment Day stuff with Finn Balor and Liv being passive-aggressive to each other. Now Liv is mad at Dominic. This leads to the main event where the entirety of Judgment Day tries to stop Damian Priest from killing Finn Balor, only for Damian Priest to win anyway with the help of the War Raiders. There was an incredible spot where Damian Priest did a Falcon Arrow off a balcony through a table onto Finn Balor, which led to Finn Balor being put on a stretcher, and then Damian Priest attacking him on the stretcher. And that was the impetus for the Judgment Day to get involved, because Finn Balor's wearing a neck brace. So now he's got to fight back wearing a neck brace. And this the two guys helped him. And then the War Raiders came in and stopped all of that. And then all of a sudden he's taking a razor's edge to a table. And then he gets a South of Heaven chokeslam. So that's it. Damian Priest wins the street fight. It was okay. It was kind of fun. Some big spots in there. The crowd loved it. Hopefully this is the end of this feud and I don't have to watch these guys wrestle again, because I don't really want to. And so yeah, I hope that's it. I want that to be it. We'll have to see where Judgment Day goes, where Damian Priest goes now that this feud is over. They didn't do a good job of showing us what's next for Liv Morgan. They also didn't show us a good job of what they're going to do with Rhea Ripley, because as she comes out there, she gets interrupted by Nia Jax, of all people, who then is interrupted by Bayley. And so now Bayley is on Raw and SmackDown. Now, they were in her hometown, so at least that was a reason for her to be there. But it's Nia Jax crowding Rhea Ripley, and then Bayley's out there. And I'm just like, holy hell. The SmackDown women's division is growing over into the Raw women's division. And it's the same people over and over again, no matter where you go. No matter where you go, it's the same fucking people. Anyway, Bayley and Rhea Ripley fought off Nia Jax. And whatever. This is pointless. This was terrible. Instead of having something ready for Rhea Ripley when she won the world title and was solidly the world champion and in the top spot, they had nothing. So now they're going to port over Nia Jax. Or even worse, they're going to port over Bayley in order to feud with Rhea Ripley. And I'm really hoping it's not Bayley, because, again, we're kind of tired of Bayley. I know some people aren't, because, again, they feel like she's been underutilized under Vince. She's an underdog, but to me, she's been overpushed. And I don't need Nia Jax in this situation at all. Now, Nia Jax is a good performer if she's going to be wrestling people like Rhea Ripley, because then Nia is bigger than Rhea. It gives Rhea the opportunity to fight from underneath and be sympathetic. But against most people, Nia Jax is a terrible matchup. She's absolutely terrible because they can't move her around. So she basically just has to eat them up, or she has to sell some of the weakest looking punches and drop kicks and stuff known to man. And she's just not that athletic and she's not that good. But for some reason, her style meshes well with Rhea Ripley. So I'm not thrilled about the women's world title division. It's clear that Triple H has no thoughts, no plans, no vision for Rhea Ripley. It was all just a plot to get the belt back on her. And now he's going to take a knee into the Royal Rumble. So you won't have to start a storyline, build a contender, or nothing. Just take a knee and then say, well, we're 2 weeks or a week away from the Royal Rumble. We'll just chill. And then we'll get a number one contender out of that, which is lazy as hell and stupid. Because there should have been something planned to continue Rhea Ripley's momentum. But he's running the risk that people are going to care about this feud with Nia Jax and not groan at it. But the women's division wasn't a complete waste. They named Lyra Valkyria as the new Women's Intercontinental Champion on this show. She actually had a pretty decent match with Dakota Kai. They took some risks. There was a suplex off the ring apron onto the floor. Just absolutely incredible. And it looked like it hurt like hell. I can't believe that Dakota Kai took that and didn't get injured. Because I was very surprised Dakota Kai didn't get hurt. They introduced a new theme song with Dakota Kai, which was kind of a pump fake. Because I was like, oh, new theme? Oh, that might mean she'd be winning. But that's not what happened. She lost, so that was great. So Lyra Valkyria being the first Women's Intercontinental Champion, I think it was the right move. I think it's a good decision because she's a work rate girl. She's not a big personality girl. Dakota Kai, her fans are absolutely insufferable. My God, she lost this match and all they could do was whine about how hard she worked. It's like, God damn, everybody works hard, man. Everybody is going to the gym and working through injury. They're getting surgeries and trying to come back. That's the story of everybody. It's not just a Dakota Kai story. I get it that you like her, but get over it. Kick rocks. Lyra Valkyria was the right decision. It might be a Becky Lynch decision, where it might be a thing where Becky Lynch made a phone call in order to get Lyra Valkyria in this spot, but it's the right decision. Lyra Valkyria was the NXT champion for a while. She was a pretty notable NXT women's champion, so her getting slotted here is fine. I would have been fine if Lyra Valkyria would have been used as an opponent for Rhea Ripley. But her being the standard bearer for the Women's Intercontinental Championship division is fine too. Dakota Kai as a singles act, I guess you got to give it more time. I don't care about Dakota Kai. Her personality is not there. In-ring stuff is fine. This was probably the best she's looked in a long time. She worked really hard. But it's another one of those situations where she's a lot like Mia Yim, where no matter how hard you work, the other person just deserves it more and can do more with the title. So it was the right decision, ultimately, to give the belt to her. Alright, so the last thing we got here is Gunther and Jey Uso, which I thought was interesting. So Gunther comes out and says that he wishes that they had a championship division to meet his expectations of, having the best wrestlers in the world. And he starts talking about all the personal drama about families and friends and all this sort of stuff. So he doesn't care about any of that stuff. The only thing worth fighting for is the World Heavyweight Championship. At that point, Jey Uso comes out, yeet, and then he challenges Gunther to a match for the World Heavyweight title at Saturday night's main event. Gunther says, hey, I already beat you twice. I beat you twice when you challenged me for the Intercontinental title. And what you are capable of is a lot less than what I am capable of. Which was an exact quote. And one of my favorite Gunther quotes. This is what separates him from a lot of people that folks compare him to. Like, he gets compared a lot to like Vladimir Kozlov and Ludwig Borga and all this. He is nothing like those guys. Like, his ability to get under your skin like that is a unique personal trait. None of those guys had his verbal skills. They also was not as rooted in their characters as he is. This is a character Gunther has been playing for a really long time. So he knows what this character should say, how it should behave, how he should carry himself, etc., etc. And people get into his matches, which I guess is because he's allowed to work his style. So this really worked on Jey Uso. Then he said he's going to expose Jey Uso as what he really is, which is a very talented tag team guy, but he just stay out of main event championship business, because for Jey Uso, main event is a nickname, but it's where Gunther belongs. Jey Uso got upset, said that he was always scared of doing this alone, but he's still out here trying to earn respect. He says he's going to win the World Heavyweight Championship, and Gunther will respect him, because main event Jey Uso is not a nickname. It is where he belongs. So it's an interesting conversation that they're having here about Gunther's lack of respect for Jey Uso as a performer, which of course is echoed by all the Gunther supporters who hate Jey Uso. At the same time, though, you have both of them saying that they both belong in the main event. You don't belong there, I do, which is interesting considering I don't believe that match will main event Saturday Night's main event. I think it's going to open the show. Jey Uso is still incredibly sympathetic. He's putting all the bloodline stuff behind him. This is his words. And he's ready to try again to be the world champion. Now, do I believe Jey Uso is going to win this match? No, I do not. Do I believe that he should have this match? Well, considering Saturday Night's main event is a filler show, yes, I do. This is the kind of match that they would have had on a Saturday Night's main event, where Hulk Hogan would have wrestled like Terry Funk, or he would have had a match with the Genius or something like that. Somebody who gets crowd reactions, but is not really that much of a challenge, even though Hogan did lose to the Genius. He lost by like count out or something, disqualification or something like that. But that's the point. You know, it's not always going to be Andre versus Hogan. Sometimes it's an underdog versus the champion. And that's the situation that we got here, where not a lot of people believe that Jey Uso can win. Same time, though, how many bites of the apple does Jey Uso get before you have to give it to him? I said this when he won the Intercontinental title, that you build his character around him falling short. Eventually, he has to break through. Otherwise, people are going to stop eating, and he's going to stop selling merchandise. He cannot get to this point and just be stuck here forever as a jobber to the stars. That's not going to work. If you're going to keep pushing him as a main event guy, he eventually has to break through. So I certainly wouldn't have him beat Gunther right now. I would just use this as a stopgap, but I would probably not book Jey Uso to continue working matches for titles and then beating him. That's just me. You know, he can just be super over in personal feuds or whatever, but putting him in the title picture again and again and again, and he never wins, because it's just not, it just doesn't make sense. You know, I just don't see that, and don't see the point of that. But if he was to win the world title, it would be a huge moment. And I think you probably wouldn't be able to find a dry eye in the building. You know, there was people crying when he won the Intercontinental title. So if he won the world title, my God, I might fucking cry. Because who knows? Anything is possible in the WWF at that point, you know? Like, goddamn. It'd be like the Road Dogg winning the world title, you know? That would have been sick. Oh my God. I'd have turned my TV off and threw it down the stairs. But Jey Uso is pretty substantial. He's selling a ton of merchandise and everybody loves him. So it's a good, solid TV match. I don't know if I would put Jey over, though. So Raw was much better this week than it was last week, even though it had the lacking of star power. Now, when I reviewed SmackDown, I said they're probably going to do the Bloodline stuff on Raw. And here is Raw, and there is no hint of Roman Reigns, no hint of Solo Sikoa, no hint of Jacob Fatu or anything else. They just decided to punt. They're not going to do any Bloodline stuff. They're not going to follow up that big tribal combat match. They're just going to let it sit. There was no promos from The Rock. There was no Cody Rhodes. Nothing. So everything that happened last week, most of it was completely detached from what happens this week, which was a huge problem that I had. This is supposed to be episodic. You cannot have these episodes being detached from each other. So now last week feels like it was a completely non-canon episode. Like, okay, this was a special event. Like, they was only going to have one of these, and that's it. You know? This felt like more of a breakthrough to Netflix than anything. Last week felt like an aberration. Like, they were just announcing stuff. And, oh yeah, here's a match. Now, there were, I think, 5 matches, maybe 6 on this show. So that should have helped some people who wanted to lose their mind about 4 matches last week. Goddamn, they gave you 5. Are you happy now? But I'm just not thrilled that they decided to have a big tribal combat match and then no follow-up. The follow-up is Roman's going in the Royal Rumble, and he doesn't even make that decision himself. It's made by Paul Heyman. Okay, what about Solo? What about Solo's relationship with Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga? These are things that we need. These are questions we need answered. And the reason we wait for the show is to get these questions answered. If you're going to pull a Walking Dead, where you're going to do something this week and then not mention it for 2 weeks, guess what happened to that show? People stopped fucking watching it. All right? Because that's the kind of stuff they was pulling. They have a great angle on the show. Somebody died, somebody get bit, and then they wouldn't touch on it for 2 or 3 weeks. And then by the time you come back to it, you didn't got enough of the boring shit, and then you're just kind of trailing off. Like, for all the stuff that they decided to do on this show, it's all fine, but people wanted to see a continuance of what they saw last week. If you had 5 million people or whatever watching last week, don't you want those people to feel like what they saw last week mattered and that you're going to continue building off of what you saw last week? At least that's what you should be thinking, right? All right. So let's wrap it up. One more thing. Apparently WWE put out a tentative pay-per-view schedule that, a couple of things were noted. They were going to be running head-to-head Memorial Day weekend with All In Texas, which got a lot of AEW fans tight in the ass. I mean, their asses are full red at this point, like baboons. They're not happy at all that Saturday Night's main event is going to be on the 24th of May, which is, I think, the same day or the same weekend as All In Texas. They're just not happy. But they're going to be even less happy because I believe the second pay-per-view, Saturday Night's main event, is going to run head-to-head with another AEW pay-per-view. So I'm not sure if that's the case or not. July the 12th. I'm not sure if that's also a AEW pay-per-view nights, or I think it's supposed to be 2. But I know All In Texas definitely is getting competition from the WWE. Also, I noticed from that PLE schedule there was no Money in the Bank. Now, I'm not a big fan of let's get rid of Money in the Bank as a show. I think it has reached top 5 status. It's a draw. And no matter what people think, oh, you just hide it in WrestleMania. You're just a bad businessman. The Money in the Bank match is a draw. That's like putting the Royal Rumble at SummerSlam. Because, just so you can have fewer events. No. Money in the Bank can draw on its own. It should be its own event. So, it wasn't on the schedule, but also there was no NXT stuff on the schedule either. And I know there's going to be NXT events. So, maybe it was just like a tentative schedule that they put out. But, SummerSlam being 2 nights, ugh. Mercy, mercy me. I don't know about that one, dog. I don't think SummerSlam need to be 2 nights, but we're in for it. It is what it is. Anyway, Raw was better this week. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.